Welcome to the SwineTime podcast here at Pipestone. I'm your host, Spencer Wayne. I'm one of the practicing veterinarians here at the Pipestone Vet Clinic, and I'm also one of the owners in Pipestone Holdings, and I get this great honor of hosting interesting guests for this podcast. Today I have a special guest, Dr. Megan Niederwerder. She is the executive director of the Swine Health Information Center, and she is here to tell us about what they do and how that applies to you. So, Megan, I will turn it over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and talk about maybe your past a little bit, things you've done, and then how you got to what your current job is, and also you can go into what that is, SHIC, S-H-I-C, Swine Health Information Center.
Well, thanks for having me, Spencer, and it's great to be here with you all. I'm Megan Niederwerder, and I'm currently serving as the Executive Director of the Swine Health Information Center since January of 2024, and before that, I served as the Associate Director of the Swine Health Information Center. In April of 2022, I started my position with SHIC. Before that, I served as a faculty member at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Kansas State University, developed a research program on swine viral diseases, not only the mitigation of viruses in feed and feed products, but also the impact of the gut microbiome on respiratory disease. And before that, I was a practicing veterinarian and also a virologist with a PhD, again, focused on swine viruses.
Where did you practice at? I didn't know that you were practicing.
Yes, so I practiced for 3 years after veterinary school, and then went back to Kansas State and completed my PhD in virology.
Okay, I did not know that about you. I know you because Scott D. from here, he is our research director. Technically still, or is he retired? He's officially retired now. But Scott would bring stuff to us about what he's up to and the information he's finding. It was always Scott D. and you were doing this research on the feed mitigants and the ability of these viruses to survive in feed. And so I talked to him the other day and I said, hey, I'm interviewing Megan, and what do you think I should ask her? What should I talk about? And he says, if you did not mention how important she was to our understanding of the ability of viruses to survive in feed and what we could do to treat the feed, you would be doing a great disservice if you didn't bring that up. So I think we would all say thank you for your involvement on that, because between Scott's practical application of these things and thinking through it and your ability to understand the virus and manage it and test the feed and the viruses, that wouldn't have been possible. He said you were essential. It wasn't like somebody else could have done it. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, it was absolutely a team effort. I mean, I think that the research partnership between Pipestone and Kansas State, as well as South Dakota State, for those initial studies looking at the survivability of ASF and other foreign animal diseases. We also looked at CSF and pseudorabies, and the stability of those viruses in various feed ingredients really provided a lot of information, again, how we mitigate those risks and think about feed sourcing for reducing the risk of foreign animal diseases and endemic diseases.
Yeah. Before all that, we didn't know anything. We had a vacuum of information. And then the easy answer is, well, it's probably safe. And then it probably wasn't. And so that stuff did a lot of good to confirming where we should be worried and what we should do to contain things and to prevent things. So thank you for that. Enough about that. We'll get to your current position and what is SHIC. Why don't you start with what is SHIC, the mission statement, and the various pieces of it?
Yeah, the Swine Health Information Center was formed in 2015 after the introduction of porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. It really was started and formed based on the producer's want and desire for an organization to really have a laser focus on what's the next emerging disease risk, how do we mitigate it, how do we protect the U.S. herd, and how do we learn about those risks. And so really within our mission statement, we're supported by pork checkoff funds, and we have a mission to really identify the next emerging disease risk, mitigate that risk, and we do that through global disease monitoring, analysis of swine health data, coordinated communications, preparedness activities, and then taking that information and really targeting research investments to provide new tools and technologies for producers, again, thinking about how do we mitigate the next emerging disease risk.
Okay, so it started with PED, and since then we had Seneca was an emergent thing that occurred here that a lot of people would be familiar with. And then, of course, everybody's thinking about ASF now just off the coast in the Gulf of Mexico in Dominican Republic. And so I imagine a lot of what you do currently centers around ASF prevention or understanding it. I don't know. Maybe go wherever you want on this conversation because there's a lot of area to cover.
So when we think about foreign animal disease, certainly some of the ones that come to mind right off the bat: African swine fever virus, foot and mouth disease virus, classical swine fever virus, pseudorabies virus. But then we have to also think about some of the lesser known viruses such as Japanese encephalitis virus, or JEV. That's a virus that really came on the radar of the Swine Health Information Center in 2022 when it moved into new regions of Australia from Southeast Asia, and it was a new genotype. It was genotype 4. It's a mosquito-borne virus that can affect pigs on sow farms because it causes abortions and stillbirths, mummified fetuses, and also failure to thrive piglets that have neurologic signs. Certainly, it's one we want to do everything we can to keep out.
So I got a question about that because you bring it up, and I'm thinking JEV, Japanese encephalitis virus. Most pig veterinarians will recognize the name, but haven't seen it, and most farmers had never even heard of it. And you're describing something that sounds like some kind of bad PRRS sounding thing, and my question is it clinically as bad as PRRS? How does it square up against something like PRRS when you're describing this JEV?
One of the things about JEV is that it affects sows in gestation and the piglets, the litter outcomes. And so we don't see a lot of impact on nursery piglets or grow finish, let's say, if they were infected later in life. It's really at the sow breeding farm level because of those reproductive outcomes in the litters.
Okay. And as far as being worried, so maybe it's not like PRRS, not quite. But as far as worrying about it, it's in Japan, I'm guessing. It's in Australia. And then what the concern here is that somehow it gets over here, just like Seneca Valley's likely came up from South America, whatever it was, 10 years ago or more. Is that fair to say that you're preventing it from a few known countries to coming here with advice on different phytosanitary or protective things you might do at a border or for transportation of products coming in?
Exactly. When we think about any time a virus either changes the species it's affecting, its pathogenicity or the severity of the infection, or of course its geographic location, we have to then ask the question, how has the risk changed to the U.S. based on how this virus is changing globally? And so when we think about things that producers can do right now, we have to think about mosquito control. Where is there standing water on farms? How can you repair curtains or think about reducing your pig's exposure to mosquitoes right now? Again, thinking about we don't have JEV in the country. We hope it stays that way. But let's think about some of those mitigation measures now early in a preventative fashion.
Yeah. You mentioned pseudorabies. We still have pseudorabies in the wild pig population here. Do you get, I believe, I don't know if you can confirm that or not, but like there's brucellosis and pseudorabies in wild pigs.
Yes.
They're just not in our domestic pigs. Is there any work you do regarding those populations, or that? Not really. I don't know if that even hits your radar screen.
The biggest thing with pseudorabies is watching how it is changing globally in countries that do have it in their commercial pig populations. Certainly, we know the risk of feral swine in the U.S., that they maintain the virus, that we have to prevent exposure of feral swine to our domestic populations. That's a really important biosecurity hazard. But another way is we want to globally monitor the virus again. Is it changing? Is there more risk to the U.S.? How should we mitigate those risks?
Okay. So functionally, you guys fund research or you distribute funds for research, I'm guessing?
Yes.
So money comes through and you don't do your own research. You don't have a SHIC lab, I'm guessing, or maybe you do.
No, so we make targeted research investments as a research foundation.
Okay. So money comes in, you wisely distribute it to where it should go, grants or research money that goes out there to different universities probably or private institutions as well. I don't know where the research has to get done. Is it always universities?
No, we fund universities and private companies to do research. Really what we try and do is identify the highest value research questions and where those research questions can be pursued most economically, of course, cost-effective use of the funds. We also try and look at really timely research outcomes, thinking about where this research can be done fairly effectively and quickly to get those answers back into the producer's hands.
Okay. Is it mostly applied type research, or is it very fundamental? This is this virus, and here's the pathology that it causes in an animal, or what type of research tends to be what's done?
Most of our research is applied. So thinking about how can this help producers tomorrow, and how does this help pig health and protect pig health as quickly as possible. So we really want to think about new tools, new technologies that may come from other industries that could help the swine industry. But certainly we have to think about how each new tool, new technology could be applied real world into U.S. farms.
Okay. Speaking of other industries, one of the things that I've noticed recently, or it's been in the news recently, has been the high-path avian influenza that's affected dairy cattle. And I know I'm talking to producers, they're aware of that. And then immediately you think of pigs, and are pigs susceptible to it, or what's the risk of pigs? And, these influenzas a lot of species are susceptible to it, but not particularly at risk. And can you just comment on that and how you guys have approached high-path avian flu and what pigs experience for influenza and the risk that pigs have, if there is any at all? I don't want people to go off thinking there's a huge risk, but I also want folks to just be aware of, like, you're thinking about it and what you're doing to prepare for possibilities.
Certainly, yeah. One of the things is that after the high-path AI outbreak in dairy cattle occurred, we coordinated a webinar in coordination with the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and Iowa State University to put together some speakers about what's the current situation of avian influenza surveillance in swine currently that the USDA performs, some experimental research looking at high-path AI in swine, the dairy cattle situation, and also some biosecurity protocols or thoughts that producers and veterinarians can have today to prevent or mitigate that risk of high-path AI in swine. Today, we can really think about some of those access points of wild bird and scavengers to our swine barns, but not only the access to the swine barns, thinking about access to feed bins, spilled feed, thinking about mortality box access to wild birds, compost piles. We also have to think about the risk of surface water contamination and thinking about how do we look around our swine barns looking for bird nests, areas that birds may roost, and removing or mitigating those risks. Again, trying to do everything we can to reduce the risk of any influenza entering our swine barns.
Right. But this particular, the H5N1 high-path avian influenza, it's not a current concern, actual concern for pigs. It's not circulating in pigs. I don't want people thinking that just because we mentioned it here.
Correct. It has not been detected in domestic pigs in the U.S., and certainly we want to keep it that way.
Okay. Is there any resources on your website that somebody could go to get updated on that particular question?
Yes, that webinar that I mentioned about the situation in dairy cattle and also some biosecurity considerations for swine is on our website. It's swinehealth.org, and it's also posted on the American Association of Swine Veterinarians website.
Okay. So listeners out there, if you went to the swinehealth.org website, you'll find that link. In particular for that question, you gathered some experts to talk about things, and you'll understand more in more detail than what we're explaining here.
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on to epidemiology, in the event that we had something like ASF introduced into the U.S., what does SHIC do? What's its role in helping to manage the information? I suppose there'll be black helicopters landing on farms and people jumping out in dark sunglasses, shutting things down, and it'll be out of our control as farmers at some level because the level of government involvement will be high. But what is SHIC's role in all this if we were to have an introduction of a foreign animal disease here?
Yeah, one of the big roles of SHIC and the Swine Health Information Center is to monitor diseases not only domestically but also globally. So we have various programs that are in place to try and inform producers and veterinarians of current trends of domestic and global diseases, not only to provide just informational resources, but also to provide signals of potential emerging issues in production. So one of the programs that we have that SHIC supports is the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Project. That is a voluntary reporting of both PRRS and PEDV by producer. And again, it gives some information about what's going on primarily in the breeding herd. So it represents about 60% of the U.S. breeding herd. Thinking about what is PRRS doing this season, how is it changing, what are the risk factors that may be involved in how this virus is moving. We also support the Swine Disease Reporting System, which is a collation of data from 6 of the veterinary diagnostic labs in the U.S. It represents about 96% of swine samples that come in to diagnostic labs. It monitors 7 pathogens of interest to producers and veterinarians, and really, again, trying to forecast trends seasonally, but also what we're seeing in different age groups to identify risks for diseases.
Okay. Actually, a common discussion you might have if you're in my job and you go out to a farm and you're talking to the folks there and they say, how's PRRS doing right now? I think, well, I only see this small little chunk of the world, and I'm not seeing it, or I am seeing it, but you'll comment on what you see. And then you refer a lot of times to the Morrison reporting, and you say, well, here, look at this chart. And you show them the chart, and you say, well, here's the overall trend that you see going on right now, and it looks like things are calm or not, but there's that level. And then I talked to a friend of mine at the diagnostic lab at Iowa State, and he says, oh, hey, actually, we've seen an uptick in PRRS cases, more than we would normally seasonally see at this time. Oh, all this is good information. You guys kind of suck all this together, and is there a good reporting outlet that helps interpret what is actually happening?
Yes. So the best way for producers and veterinarians to receive that information is by signing up to receive our monthly newsletter. Each month, at the first week of the month, we provide the domestic swine disease reporting system report, the global disease monitoring report within the newsletter, and essentially what you can look at for not only the figures, but there's some interpretation that's underneath the figures to help sort of have some take-home messages for what's going on with these different diseases throughout the industry. How can we learn from it? What do we need? For instance, if ASF has been introduced into a new country and one of my employees on farm is going to travel there and visit that location, well, certainly it's a good thing for producers and veterinarians to have on their radar where ASF is globally and what type of precautions or preventions they can put in place for downtime for their employees prior to re-entering the farm. So those are the kind of things that the global disease monitoring and the domestic disease monitoring report can keep producers and veterinarians up to date on.
Okay, and that's swinehealth.org?
Yes.
Go there, and you can find a place to sign up for that newsletter.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
And are the reports farmer-friendly, or is this really inside nerd stuff where it's just way too technical? Or how readable is it, I guess? For myself, I'm asking.
Yes. So both, I would say. There's figures that are very data-driven and scientific, but there's also that on the swine disease reporting system, there's some interpretation, and that comes from our advisory group. So those are advisory members that are including veterinarians out in the field that say, I see the data, this is what it means to me as a veterinarian practicing or a producer that's really seeing what's going on in the field. So we try and provide it so that it's in a way that you can see the data, but also have layperson friendly terminology for interpretation.
Okay. You mentioned something earlier about recommendations or protocols for biosecurity. Do you have literally like protocols, how to be careful guidelines on the website? I don't know how practical or applied you get on some of that stuff. Is that also there at that website?
Yes, one of the resources we have that I think is really fantastic for producers and veterinarians to take a look at would be our standardized outbreak investigation form. And it sounds like you only use it for an investigation after an outbreak, but what we're encouraging people to also utilize it for is to identify biosecurity hazards that may be on your farm right now before the event of an outbreak. So essentially it goes through very systematically and consistent, deliberate questions about potential hazards for pathogen entry. So when is your manure pumping? What did you have a repair person come on for equipment repair this month? Did you think about a new vaccine crew? Was there a new loadout crew? What are the biosecurity hazards that can potentially put your farm at risk for pathogen entry that you can, again, identify now and put in proactive measures to mitigate those risks?
Okay, this isn't data gathering. It's not a form on a website where somebody would put in stuff and then you upload it to your website. This is just helpful forms that let you analyze what your own situation is.
Yes.
Okay, so you fund research. You've got good practical tools like what you just described. You're keeping track of disease around the world. You're tied in with the diagnostic labs and the Morrison monitoring project. And so you've got U.S. type disease data you're processing and reporting back out. What else am I missing? There's other stuff you do. It's a huge amount of things you guys do. Did I miss something important?
Yes, there's a couple of programs I just want to highlight. The Diagnostic Support Fee Program provides funding for producers and veterinarians where we can identify a definitive diagnosis in cases where endemic disease has been ruled out, and of course foreign animal disease has been ruled out. But we can look for those, quote, zebras, right? What's less likely to occur, and we could provide funding support for that. So that's called our Diagnostic Support Fee. The other aspect that's...
Wait, stop there a little bit. Diagnostic support fee. So like if I'm out there and I'm working with the producer and I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, and we're scratching our heads because we're not finding things that are normally found with what we're seeing, and we're coming up blank every time. You guys have I would pay a fee, or we would pay a fee for special project help on understanding that. Is that what you're saying?
SHIC would pay the diagnostic fee to support you in this case to identify the definitive diagnosis. So when you're working with a producer and you have tested for PRRS, it's a respiratory outcome, and you tested for PRRS, you thought it was a PRRS case and it's negative. And perhaps the producer doesn't want to pursue additional diagnostics, but you're going, we may have something here that we really want to identify and need additional funding support to pursue. SHIC can support that funding. So we want to look for emerging diseases before they spread. And that's where we can come in and assist with additional diagnostics, usually next generation sequencing, to really look what's in there.
I didn't know about that. I want to talk to you after this about a couple of cases. So
yes,
we'll
good.
Talk later. Okay, and I cut you off. You were going to say something else.
That's okay. The other thing that I want to highlight is our research programs, because of course that is where the majority of the pork checkoff dollars go through our organization to fund research. We have a couple of different research programs going on right now. One is the Wean to Harvest Biosecurity Research Program. That's in collaboration with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research and the National Pork Board. And we've had that program going for about 1.5 years now, really looking at how do we enhance biosecurity, not only on the nursery, the grow finish, but also in the transportation phase of our industry, thinking about new ways to consider biosecurity. So maybe that's a new entry protocol. Maybe it's not a water shower, but an air shower. Thinking about how do we identify the areas on a trailer that are most likely to be contaminated or not effectively cleaned in the truck wash. Thinking about how do we train our personnel to be motivated to complete biosecurity protocols. So sort of taking an alternative approach. Let's not just translate everything we do on the sow farms to our grow finish facilities, but let's think about this in a novel way. And I know Pipestone has a lot of work in this area too. I think it's really complementary that we can come together and enhance biosecurity in these phases of production.
All right. I think we ran out of time, so we'll cut it off there. But I think we got through the important stuff too. So I really appreciate you being here, Megan. There was a lot of things I'd learned, and for the listeners out there, mostly I would say they're likely farmers listening, I'd encourage you to go to the swinehealth.org website. And is it easy enough to navigate there where you could find some of the things you're talking about, the reports and some of the tools?
Yes, absolutely. And on the top right section is where it says sign up for the newsletter. If you sign up there, then you'll get the disease monitoring reports every month and also get any research updates as those reports come in. And you'll be able to keep up to date with any of the information that we're providing.
Okay. Dr. Megan Niederwerder from Swine Health Information Center. Thank you for being here. And thank you to our listeners. I encourage you all to tune in for our next episode of the SwineTime podcast here at Pipestone. The SwineTime podcast was created for the pork industry and individual pork producers around the country. Hosted by me, Dr. Spencer Wayne with Pipestone Veterinary Services, the podcast contains pork industry news, advancements in animal care, and how to enhance your productivity. Find the SwineTime podcast at www.pipestone.com or on your favorite listening platform.